That looks great. Here we go. Look how clean those lines are. That's really neat. Hey everybody, it's Anna. Welcome back to my Fluid Art channel, and thank you so much for being here. I'm doing another pendulum pour today. A few weeks ago I did a pendulum pour for the first time in years, and I really enjoyed it, so I want to do another one today. But today I'm using the colors of my home state of West Virginia. Actually today, the day that I'm painting this, is West Virginia Day, so it's very fitting. The colors I'm using for the pendulum are blue and yellow, because of West Virginia University and their blue and gold. Very popular colors in this state. But then I'm also using some olive green and burnt umber and some white. So those will be the colors of the forest, because this is the mountain state. It is entirely within the borders of the Appalachian Mountains. Lots of trees, beautiful state, love it, love it. So this is going to be the background, and I'm going to brush paint that on in kind of the gradient like I did in my last one. And then these ones will be spiraled on with the pendulum. So I have my little, this is like a 1 ounce squeeze bottle with a very fine tip, and I've cut the bottom of the bottle off so that I can pour paint in and hang it up. And then I taped rocks on the side to give it a little bit more heft so that it would swing with more momentum and power. But I'll hang that up in just a minute once I paint the background. I don't think there's anything else to do, so let's make a painting. By the way, there is still time for you to get feedback from the left-brained artist and me. If you would be interested in having some troubleshooting help of maybe a paint pour that went wrong, or you went, I was going for this, but then this happened instead, and I don't understand that, we would love to take a look at some of your pictures and help figure out what went wrong. So if you'd like to get some troubleshooting assistance, click the link down in the video description and you can fill out a form and tell us all the details. Let's get to work now. So I'm going to put some of my background colors. I'm just going to use straight tube paint. My white is, I get it in the bulk jar. But I'm using straight paint for the background instead of fluid paint. Whoops. And I'm just putting it here on a piece of plastic versus a palette, because I need a nice large space for my brushes. I'm trying to decide, do I have white, green, brown, or green, white, brown? I think that's what I'm going to do. Have the white in the middle. I think it'll feel more balanced just because the green and the brown are both relatively dark, so it's not an obvious kind of light to dark transition. So I have the light band in the middle and the dark top and bottom. So I have some little foam brushes, which are not great quality, but they're what I have, and they worked okay last time. So I'm going to dip that in there and just start putting on a layer. The reason to use straight tube paint rather than something that has been diluted is you can be more aggressive with your brushing with a straight paint. When your paint has been thinned, if you brush too hard, it just wipes it right off the canvas. So if you want a nice, even coat, straight paint is easier to work with. Okay, now that I've got the sides, I'll just got a couple bits of the foam brush here in it. Okay, I'll just kind of finish up a little bit of smoothing across, make sure it's all nicely covered, including those edges. That looks pretty good. Nice. Next one, I realize my line is not entirely straight there, but we're going to be adding white and we'll be blending all that in right now. So I'll start with sort of the plain white middle, and then I'll come up and blend into the green, because I don't want to get green in the white until it's time. Okay, let's start blending the white into the green here. So as the white goes up into the green, it lightens that, and then the green comes down into the white and blends in there. So it's all kind of back and forth. Oh, that's really beautiful. Because we don't want this to look like 3 static bands of color. We want it to look like it's fading from one thing into the next. And I think that's pretty much what we've got. And edges can be tweaked if necessary. Cool. And I don't know that I'm going to have any plain white in the middle. It may be that the brown blends up enough into the white that we just have a fade from dark green to light green and from dark brown to light brown. And if that's what happens, that's totally okay with me. All right, now for the brown, which I will start here at the bottom and then come up into the white. When you're working with straight paint, it does dry pretty quickly. So you just want to make sure that you're working quickly and you're not taking a really long time, because it'll be harder to blend a color that has begun to dry than one that's still quite fresh. Okay, I'm going to start blending the brown into the white now. Benefit of it drying fast is that you don't have to wait a really long time before you add your next layer, which is good for a pendulum pour. Got too much brown still in this brush, so when I'm trying to blend the sides, it's too dark. So now I'm looking down at the bottom of the canvas and I'm realizing my brown, it's a little bit bare down on certain sections, so I'm going to try to add some more of just the straight brown. And of course I had to squeeze as much of the lighter brown out of my brush as possible before I add the darker. Yeah, I think that looks fantastic. I love this blend. I love that there isn't a big band of straight white. It just fades really beautifully. I'm going to go rinse off my brushes, put up my string, and then we'll do the pendulum part. All right, I've got my string hanging up, so this will go right here. It'll hook onto there. It's just paper clips, guys. You can make do with a lot of stuff. And then it'll spin around. So I've been trying to decide blue first or yellow. My instinct is to go blue first. But I think then when I have to rinse out the bottle, I think it's going to be harder to get rid of all of the blue pigment to then do the lighter color of yellow, and it'll end up green, so I think I'll do yellow first. But let me show you my paint consistency, because this paint, look what a long stream I get. That's what you want in a pendulum pour. You want to be able to get not just a thin stream, but a really long stream of paint. And typical acrylic paint doesn't do that super well. What I did with this is I've noticed that house paint, gloss or semi-gloss house paint especially, I haven't tried every sheen, but what I've noticed about house paint is that the viscosity of it feels very thick, but it flows very well. You want your paint to hold together really well, but you also want it thin enough that it'll flow in a very thin stream. So what I did for these paints is I took tube paint and I mixed that paint 1 part paint to 2 parts untinted house paint, like you would use for a bloom pour. And then I added 2 parts of floetrol. So the house paint and the floetrol kind of became the pouring medium, and then I thinned it with water until it got to that nice, like makes a thin stream but a really long stream. So I feel like this looks like a really good consistency for a nice smooth pendulum pour, because if your paint wants to break up, you'll get lots of it'll be like strings of beads. You'll get drips instead of a nice stream. I'm going for a stream, so that's what I used, and if you didn't catch what I just said, all the details are in the video description, and I'll share the ratios and everything there too. Now for the design. I was watching back through my other video, and I noticed that when I start the pendulum, eventually it sort of spirals to the left. So no matter which way I start it, you know, that'll be the largest design, and then it'll eventually turn towards the left. Meaning, if I center this more or less under here, yeah. I often like to be slightly off-center, actually, because it's easier to look at it as abstract and intentional when things are off-center. If you try to center a pendulum pour and it isn't perfect, it'll really distract you. But if it's off-center, you're like, cool! So, slightly off-center, left to right, but not much. I think... I don't know. I don't have the science of this down completely. But the point is, you can place your canvas and you can place your string in different ways to make the pendulum part come out in different ways. So I've got my yellow in my bottle here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start it more or less sideways, because I'd love for it to then spiral and become more or less vertical. So it's not going to be entirely sideways, it's going to be kind of this direction, so that hopefully it'll end up slightly left of vertical, if that makes sense. So I'm going to start over here, I'm going to take the cap off to make sure it's flowing well, and then I'll go ahead and send it out this direction. Okay, it is not flowing very fast, as you can see, it is dripping. So, because I think this paint is a really good consistency, rather than thinning it down, I'm going to get a nozzle for this that's slightly wider. I got several of these bottles in a pack. I think it was like 6 of them. And the way the tips work is you actually have to cut them yourself to make them the size that you want. Which means you can entirely customize whether you want a really narrow opening or a little bit wider. So this one is just slightly wider. It's not a lot wider, but I think it'll work better for this thickness of paint. If you have really thin paint and a pretty large opening, you're going to get a lot of paint pouring out, which is not what I want. But clearly, my paint was too thick for the tiny opening. All right, let's try this again. Let's hope it works a little better. I think it will. Okay, there we go. That's a nice stream. Here we go. My bottle is spinning a lot, which is making some of the lines be a little bit wavy, but that'll be all right. Starting to get a little bit drippy, so I'm going to stop it there. I believe the drips happen because there wasn't as much weight of the paint pushing down in the cup, so as more paint goes out, there won't be as much left in this little bottle. And that's one of the downsides of using a small bottle, is because as your paint flows out, you don't have as much left. But I think those drips are really cool. I'm glad it's not mostly drips, but I don't mind those at all. I like that a lot. It's pretty narrow, but look how clean those lines are. That's really neat. All right, I'm going to rinse my bottle here, and then I'll come back and I'll do the blue, but we'll angle the blue in a different direction. My bottle is rinsed. It's time to do the blue, so let me think about, since this is going this direction, I'd like the other one to go more this direction. But I liked spinning it this way because no paint went on the floor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it like this. Good enough for now. We'll add our blue paint and then we'll go ahead and do that one. I'm putting in as much of the paint as I can because I'd rather not have the drips like I had with the yellow, or I'd rather get a little bit more of the blue paint pouring out before we get to the drips. So we've got it pretty much filled here. Okay, once again, I'm going to take the cap off, make sure it's flowing properly, and then I'll go ahead and spin it this way. That looks great. Here we go. Sometimes it's hard to know when to stop it, but it's still looking cool. I'd like to see how far it goes here in the middle. I like that we can now see the full oval, which is cool. Uh-oh, it's starting to drip. Well, that's a bummer that right when it was starting to get really interesting there in the middle is when we ran out of paint. I don't know, I can't decide, guys. I need to look at it straight. The hardest part about pendulum pours is knowing when to stop, knowing when to say, it's perfect, I don't want to add anything more, and when you're like, I'd love if there was a little bit more this way, but then maybe you don't have enough paint, or you're worried that you can pull it off, so I do like this. So I think I'm going to stop there. Let me give you a close-up. Okay, here it is. So I wish that blue had been able to spiral in a little bit more because, I mean, you see how pretty those patterns are just on the table? And if we could have gotten that spiraling all the way to the middle, it would have been really cool. But as it is, I'm really happy with this paint blend. I think this is the perfect pouring medium for a pendulum pour. So I'm really happy to have found a solution to that. And I don't mind the few drips in the middle. I think they add some cool details. And I love this brush painted background, how it just fades from dark to light and then into the brown. So overall, I'm very happy with this. I will show you how it looks when it's dry. Okay, it's actually just been a few hours, and as the paint layers started to dry, I realized that my blue color, which is phthalo blue, it dried much darker. So it's much more of a navy, and from a distance it just doesn't show up as blue, it's darker. So what I did is I added some white house paint, plus some more floetrol and water. So I have a lighter shade of blue here. And so I do get to add kind of the element going this direction, the narrower element that I had been wanting earlier, but I didn't want to do it all in the same blue because I didn't have enough paint. But with a third color, a second blue, I think it'll look good and balance everything out. So we are going to do that now. Okay, yeah, I think we're going to do it more or less like that. And put that lighter blue here into the bottle, as much of it as we can. I think I mixed it thin enough. It's always hard to tell when you only have one color and you can't compare it to your other paint. But I think I mixed it to the right thickness. Okay, so when I did the yellow before, it was very kind of straight, narrow lines, and then when I did the blue, it was much more round. I actually kind of like the narrow a little bit better, so that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to go kind of towards this corner first and let it go that way. All right, let's take the cap off and see how it flows. Oh, perfect. Those lines are coming out so beautifully. All right, now we've got the oval completely on the canvas. I hope I have enough paint left to get nice rings all the way into the center. Okay, I think I like this. Super cool! Yeah. All right, let me take a look at the whole thing. Yeah, that's really neat. Much bluer. Let me let this dry and then I will show you the finished piece. Okay, it's dry. So this blue color definitely stands out more as blue on that background than the navy did. You see how dark that looks compared to the lighter blue? So it is perhaps a little bit busy with all 3 passes of the pendulum, but I think it's pretty cool. And I'm so happy to have found the way of mixing paint for a nice, smooth pendulum pour. That's really exciting to me. So I'm excited to do more of these pours now that I know how to mix any color into a paint that's going to flow really well out of that little bottle. But yeah, I love the background. It's a really cool gradient. What's neat is seeing the light blue layered over the dark blue, because the dark blue had already kind of dried, so you do see the ridges of the one paint crossing over the other that you don't see with the darker blue and the yellow, because those both happened while both paints were wet. But when a wet paint is layered over a dried paint, you will see a bit of that texture. But super cool! Thank you guys for joining me for this West Virginia themed pendulum pour. I hope it inspired you to try something new. Let me know if you do a pendulum pour after this. I will see you all in the next video. Bye guys!